Have you here with us today for the first time. In this episode, we'll explore three key concepts to help leaders master the art and science of culture transformation. Now, as I quickly share some housekeeping notes, drop in the chat or in the comments box where you're joining in from today. We are recording today's session, so if you're interested in a replay, be on the lookout for an email later today. That email is going to include a survey for feedback, as well as a number of resources that are aligned to today's conversation. We suggest putting your phone on Do Not Disturb, quitting out of your email and messaging apps so you can get the most out of today's discussion, and it's also going to help with your audio and video quality. And we love interaction, so feel free to share your thoughts and comments with us in the chat throughout the show. Now, to get this hour underway, I'm going to introduce our speakers. Our guest for today is the Vice President of Consulting at NLI, where she manages the consulting and advisory functions. She has extensive experience in management and consulting across a diverse array of industries. She's the author of NLI's seminal research on organizational growth mindset and brain-friendly leadership models. Her current specialty is partnering with executives on transformational initiatives, specifically global leadership transformations and large-scale culture change. Please join me in welcoming Vice President of Consulting at NLI, Rachel Cardero. It's great to have you here today, Rachel.
Thanks, Shelby, and a big happy Women's Day to everybody on the line.
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. And joining her is no stranger, an Aussie-turned New Yorker who coined the term neuroleadership when he co-founded NLI over 2 decades ago. With a professional doctorate, 4 successful books under his name, and a multitude of bylines ranging from the Harvard Business Review to the New York Times and many more, a warm welcome to the co-founder and CEO of the Neuroleadership Institute, Dr. David Rock. Great to have you here, David, and I will pass it over to you.
Thank you so much, Shelby. Great to be here. I'm so looking forward to this conversation. It's such a fascinating and important conversation. And to be honest, I schedule these things because there are things I want to talk about more and understand more and unpack more and kind of get feedback from people as well. So I'll be really curious to see people's comments in the chat about some of the ideas. Please share your kind of insights and questions as we go. It's such an important topic. It's really a perennial topic, which is like, how do you change large numbers of people? And whether that's 100 people in a startup or 10,000 people in sort of mid-sized firm or 100,000 people, or what about the entire the entire USA or the entire world? If you're trying to kind of really think big, what are the principles of that? And I've had the privilege of helping literally a presidential candidate think about his things recently. I've been approached by some people doing some planetary level things on climate, and it's just really challenging my thinking about whole system change and kind of what the principles are. So it made me think about, all right, what are some of the principles and where do we kind of need to found? So that's kind of how we got here. But Rachel, great to chat with you. It's been 10 years we've been collaborating.
Thinking that very thing. It's been over 10 years that you and I have been working together. And I mean, that entire time, this topic, this theme of change has been evergreen. And I wonder, I'm really curious to know, across that 10 years, we've been looking at human change, organizational change, environmental change, like all these different types of change. What really got you interested in change, human change, let's say, way back when? I think it's over 26 years of more than 5 million people have been affected by NLI.
Yeah, now it's about 2 or 3 million a year, which is really scary. Really something. But I guess there's that thing about you teach best what you most need to learn, so that you can learn it. And I started NLI in my early 30s. And I was not very organized, was not very focused, was not very disciplined. I really wanted to kind of understand my own brain and kind of how to help people kind of improve. And I found that, I started out coaching people, and I found that coaching people had this amazing kind of backwash effect, or sort of, flow-on effect, that it really, really helped me with my own goals and what I was trying to do. And I got really, really interested in how you help particularly smart people be smarter, how you help people who are already pretty successful kind of do more. And at the time, I just thought there was nothing out there for that. There was therapy, there was, a lot for people who had clinical issues or psychological issues, but there was nothing at the time. And I kind of helped founded the coaching movement 26 years ago outside North America. We've trained 25,000 something coaches across, Africa, India, the Middle East, Eastern Europe, Latin America, lots of places. But it was always, it sort of started with this question of how do you help smart people get smarter? And then it got, got kind of obsessed with this question of sort of the most effective way to do that. That was sort of where we started out.
Mm-hmm. And that coaching material is really impactful for me personally. I mean, even breaking down the faces of insight for people, like knowing as a leader, being able to look at somebody and know when they're processing and when they're thinking. And now, looking at systems change, I'm wondering, like, when you made that switch from even looking at people's faces to help create change to kind of broader organizational change.
Yeah. Let me just address that insight thing. One of the biggest kind of breakthroughs that we had in 26 years was realizing that the active ingredient in coaching, that was like the necessary kind of active ingredient if you're making a drug, was a strong moment of insight. And we realized that something you could literally see if you're watching people, or hear if you're listening to them. It was a very recognizable moment. And it was actually that got me really obsessed about neuroscience. I'd been reading it privately and studying it privately since I was like a teenager, literally. But I realized, like, insight changed the brain. It was a biological phenomena. It happened in every language. I was seeing it literally in multiple languages. And it just became clear to me that giving people this big aha moment was the necessary condition for really meaningful change. And amazingly, when you had that, these huge things would happen that maybe wouldn't have happened for years and years and years before. So that sort of started my journey. And then I started to see that was like really relevant to whole systems, that kind of creating this insight moment at a system level was necessary. And I guess what got me interested was we made a transition. It was pretty early. It was like 2022 or something. No, 2001, 2002. Is that we started having organizations contact us and say, can you help us with our, all our people managers across the company? We need to shift our culture. And it started out as, we need our managers to be more coach-like. Can you help us do that? You're training great coaches. Can you actually help managers be better coaches? And it just came to see that there was this huge gap in being able to do change at a systems level. And most of the work that I was seeing was incredibly inefficient and ineffective. You'd come in to work in an organization, and over 2 years you'd work with 10% of the employees, maybe, really slowly, and you just never get momentum. So you could create insight, but you couldn't get momentum. So really early, more than 20 years ago, I got really interested in how do you affect a whole organization, and how do you impact them, and I think. I think like a good metaphor is like if you've got like a single like generator, petrol, gasoline, generator that's just, putting out a bit of power. What's the difference between that and a racing car? And on one level, they're exactly the same, right? They're both, burning fuel and moving a piston and outputting power, right? From a distance, they're really, really similar. But if you know how to fix a generator, you don't necessarily know everything about how to fix a Formula One car. But there are principles that kind of apply at the different levels of scale. And I think that's kind of what it is. There are things about individual change that are really transferable to organizational change, but there's a lot of other things around it to really kind of make it work.
Yeah, I love thinking about this in terms of cities, like, people in cities creating change, let's say helping one person exercise more is one thing versus having an entire city exercise more. I'm a city girl. And I'm like, I think so many people, it's hard to see what the similarities and the differences are between those levels of change because they feel so different. I think sometimes the similarities are harder to identify than the differences. Have you seen trends with the differences and similarities over the years?
Yeah, I mean, I think if you sort of take the sort of core engine and a F1 Formula One sort of metaphor, I think that at a system level, you actually still need people to have insights. You actually need, but instead of having sort of how do you help this one person have an insight, is how do you help a million people have an insight?
Yeah.
And it's still an insight, right? And insights require the same mechanisms to happen, right? You need people open, right? You need things that kind of different, data coming at them. They need to be able to reflect. It's ideal if the data coming at them is a really powerful story, because the story kind of opens the mind, but also has like a really powerful why or science or research or data. And it's kind of the combination of the story and the science together that creates the strongest insight we see. So that is a required condition, whether you're trying to change one person or a million people, is you want those people to have insights. And the principles for creating those insights are very, very similar, but just kind of more complicated. So that's very much there. The other thing that you need is you need some kind of prioritization, like something that makes people like take action on the insight. Because we all have big ideas every day. We all have, things we go, oh, I really should do that. That's a little bit of an insight, right? I've forgotten to exercise for the last week. I was really in a flow before. I should get back to it. That's an insight, but do we do it, right? And so you need some kind of, we call it positive social pressure, that has a good percentage of the people who have insights now take action, right? There's lots and lots of different ways of doing that. As you get to scaling that gets harder and harder. But, in an organization, something as simple as, hey, 5 o'clock Friday in your local time, you need to email this email address with the 3 things you did differently this week. And that email could be seen by one person who only looks at 5 out of 5 million emails, right? But it's called the panopticon effect, where people feel like they're being watched. Now you get, 70, 80, 90% of people taking an action and emailing just because someone could, read that email, right? So that's an example of positive social pressure at scale. That would work at 100,000 people, where you need some structure where people feel like they've really got to do this. And the biggest reason, and this is a really important finding from social science, the biggest reason people do something, it turns out, is they think everyone is doing it. So we've got to create this impression that everyone is doing this. And that creates this positive pressure of people not wanting to kind of look bad in front of their peers and all that. So you need insight, you need some kind of positive pressure, social pressure, right? And then you also need to keep people focused on this over time. So you can't just kind of do something, get people to do something once, right? You need to kind of focus people over a unit of time. And that obviously gets harder and harder at scale. But I think of those as sort of the 3 minimum viable product elements for change at an individual or any scale, planetary scale. We've got this really cool project at the moment. Someone, a friend and colleague of many years, is working on kind of the next version of Live Aid, like a huge event around the world in the next 12 months, that will at a whole other scale, involving sort of every country in the world and all this. And I was talking to her about it. I was like, oh, you haven't got a habit activation strategy for for people to actually do things. Like, what's the call to action? She's like, no, we haven't. That's amazing. So we're going to work on, like, literally, how do you kind of nudge the entire world to do things that improve climate change, but following the science? Like, how do you identify the right habits, right, at the level of billions of people? What are the right habits for billions of people? And then how do you kind of get people to take those on? And then how do you kind of really scale that? And those are sort of 3 different things. What are the right habits? How do you embed them in individuals? And then how do you scale it? There's sort of 3 different questions. Don't ask me how we're going to do it yet. It's an incredibly crazy, exciting project that we're just at the very, very beginning of. But I think it's something behavioral science should be working on. We should be working on, that kind of question. So those are the 3 things. People need insights. They need some kind of positive pressure. So it should be in some social construct. And they need to do this over time. And if you can create a strong enough insight and those other 2 conditions, lots and lots of people seem to really change. It's really amazing just how much.
Yeah. And I found it's a little counterintuitive for people sometimes when they don't, they figure, oh, people will take action, they'll figure out their own way. But I feel like when they don't have those building blocks for change, if you come to this idea time and time again, and you're like, oh, I thought I was going to do something and I didn't do it. And well, I tried last time, but it didn't happen. And I tried again, even if it's small, at some point, it's like, why am I doing this? Even if you want to participate, you just give up on it.
Yeah. But I go back to this thing. It's really interesting. For such an important topic, there's so little research on whole systems change, right? And I'll give you a bit of a story. When I first started getting interested in the brain, was literally professionally. I've been interested personally, literally forever. But when I first started getting interested professionally, I was teaching at NYU. I was on an adjunct there. I basically built the coaching programs using our IP, and we plugged that into NYU, and we were running a coaching certificate program. And what happened was, because it was academic, I needed to bring theories and research. And at some point, I just started bringing kind of literally just photocopies of some of my favorite brain books, because there were photocopies of specific quotes, because there were some quotes in books like John Ratey's The User's Guide to the Brain, and Deutsch's The Brain That Changes Itself, and other things. That there were some quotes in there that actually were so helpful for coaches to understand. Like it made everything make sense. And cut a long story short, we ended up putting a lot of neuroscience into that program, and that kind of gave me the permission to really start reaching out to scientists and studying. And we ended up writing a book called Coaching with the Brain in Mind. And the reason I wrote that book, very self-serving, is that we had a pile of photocopies this big every class we ran, and of different handouts. I was like, we got to organize this stuff. And so we wrote this book that basically took new coaches through all the theories they should understand for to coach. And it was literally like basics of psychology, but also adult learning theory and systems theory, right? And all these different theories, like a dozen different kind of theories, and actually showing how neuroscience links them all. It's a little out of date now, but still super relevant. It's called Coaching with the Brain in Mind. If you want to, my team wants to put it in the chat, but I think it's still available. I don't know. But it's anyway, we built this, and one of the things that was surprising was how little research there was on like, how do you change a large system? Like, how do you change a school of 500 people and 100 teachers? Like, how do you change a 1,000-person company? There's just nothing out there. And it's so amazing. And I think, we're going to hopefully spearhead, or we are spearheading kind of the research into that space, but kind of large system change. But, one of the few people studying it, there's a fantastic university in Colorado that studies it from a social science lens, and they've published some really great work about kind of, how do you get people to adhere to a health strategy, or how do you get people to adhere to a putting towels on hanging up so you can reuse them strategy. My hot tip for hotel owners is just put towel warmers in. If you put towel warmers in, people will reuse their towels for days. It's such a logical thing. But anyway, what they found is if you put a sign up that says like 72.5% of people, in this room, reuse their towel, you get this massive bump in people, putting their towel up, compared to, people in this hotel do it, or people, generally do it. And they study these kinds of paradigms, and what they found is sort of the more personal it felt, and the more it felt like everyone was doing this, the more these things happen. So that just became such a critical variable of we've got to create these kind of movements where it feels like everyone's on board with this. That's such a key variable. But as I said, no one's really studying kind of whole systems change in that way. One of the fun things that we did sort of by accident is we developed a metric for this very question. We call it BCP, or behavior change percentage. And we've been collecting data for, what is it, 5 years now? More than 5 years? How much BCP data do we have? Probably 7. Yeah, maybe 6. So BCP is essentially, you're working with a large group of people, whether it's the entire planet or 10 people, right? And there are specific habits you want them to take up, right? Let's say for 10 people, it's like, we want you to drink 2 liters of water every day. So what you're going to do is you're going to run your intervention, and then at least a month after the intervention, you're going to ask people, how many times a week did you drink 2 liters of water, right? Maybe if they're managers, they're going to ask their team, how many times did you see them, do that? And then we're going to collect that percentage. So it's a behavior change percentage across the 10 or 1,000 people, right? And we'll have test questions and all these other things. And we see, there's very strong variation between different solutions, different modalities of delivery. Like the worst BCP is actually in-person workshops, turns out, because they're one-off. But we've been collecting this data that sort of measures habit activation at scale. And it's been a really, really interesting metric. Every year we study these numbers before our conference to kind of look for new insights. But anyway, that's a couple of thoughts. But back to you.
Yeah. I mean, those, like some of the things you're mentioning, like those cards in the hotel, 75% of people are reusing their towel. I mean, they definitely work on me and others. something I've appreciated in my work with NLI over the last decade plus is you've mentioned so many things already, insight, positive social pressure, all these different building blocks, but taking it and creating some type of
Yeah.
architecture. And
We should talk about architecture. Good point.
yeah,
Yes.
I don't think people know how much you love architecture. Like, tell us a little bit about when you kind of
Well,
became interested in it.
I'm one of the people often say to me, "Wow, you're so good at so many things." I'm like, no, I generally only do things in public that I'm good at. So you don't really see the things I'm not good at. It turns out I'm terrible at a lot of things. One of those is drawing. Like I have a fixed mindset about it, obviously. But I still do it. I draw stick figures all the time. I'll get up on a big stage and do terrible drawing. But I guess I could get better if I wanted. But it's something I never got good at. But I actually love architecture, and I think if I'd been half decent at drawing or been, had lessons or something, I probably would have been an architect. Because I look back, I found a book recently of my primary school, like second or third grade. I was drawing buildings. I was drawing airplanes. I was architecting different things, and I was fascinated with kind of the art of building stuff. And I mean, every kid loves Lego, but I built like, worlds and cities. Yeah. And I was really, really interested in it. And when I first became an entrepreneur in my 20s, I actually got to work with a bunch of architects, and I would just be fascinated with the whole process and all the rules and the kind of, particularly like the way you'd build a blueprint, right? And this blueprint would be like, would be this plan without having done any work, would be this plan for, what you're going to build. And I didn't do that much work, but I built like 2 or 3 shops and a couple of houses, and, sort of really got involved. I'm sure I annoyed the architects immensely, but I sort of learned a lot of the principles and found it fascinating. And I think I probably would have done something, like that. But I just saw there's actually so many principles in common. If you're gonna build a strategy, a change strategy, let's anchor on an example. Let's anchor on a company of 10,000 people, right? So a company of 10,000 people, fairly spread out. Maybe they're in technology, maybe they're in energy, maybe they're in healthcare, who knows? But 10,000 people, they're in one country in North America, across the place. You want them to change. You want them to be, let's say, significantly more customer focused, right? Like, how do you architect that change? How do you kind of think about that change journey? Like, is it a day? Is it a week? Is it a month? Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? What's the length of time? How do you do it? Like, that's kind of the question I've been thinking about, sort of imagining a group of people like a building and saying, how do we create the right blueprint so that this change initiative actually holds together? That's kind of how I'm seeing it.
Yeah, so blueprints, structural integrity, there's definite similarities between systems change that involves humans and architect, like building.
Yeah, let's start with that one, structural integrity. So
yeah.
Structural integrity is of a building is really important, right? If you're going to build a 2-story house, you want it to last like 50 years, right? Maybe 100 years. You want it to last a long time. You don't want it caving in on people when they play loud music. It's got to have structural integrity, right? What does that mean? It means you're following the rules of physics, the laws of physics, right? The laws of engineering, right? There's no like really heavy things without supports, right? Things are built so that they stand up, right? So structural integrity means that it's not just everything fits together, but it's going to hold together for a long time, right? That's structural integrity of a building. And it's interesting, it has many different components, structural integrity, right? Think about all the rules of engineering that you have to follow. It's not just weight, it's strength, it's lifetime. There's dozens and dozens of kind of engineering principles to get to structural integrity. But the essence of it is that it holds together. And what should happen as you build that 2-story house, as you build it, every element you add should increase the structural integrity, right? So you put the foundations down, doesn't really matter. You just got concrete. It's not going to fall apart. But you put the walls in, it sort of makes the concrete more robust, right? Now you put the outside, it makes the pillars better. Now you put the roof on. So everything you add makes the whole thing more robust, right? It increases its structural integrity. That is completely not the case with most change initiatives, right? Most change initiatives, you start out pretty well with a clear strategy. You add something, it makes it a bit kind of fuzzier. You add more, it gets a bit fuzzy. You add more, it gets a bit fuzzy. So they haven't built a blueprint at the start, right? They haven't worked out the rules of engineering. to make sure that this actually holds together. Because your change journey, if you want people still having strong insights in 3 years, right, or 5 years, right, if you want people to still have strong insights, you're really going to have to think ahead about, all the different engineering principles. So in our work, structural integrity, we call coherence, right? And coherence is literally the structural integrity of ideas. And so I can put a blueprint in front of an experienced architect and say, hey, do you think this building has structural integrity? Like, do you think this building will hold together? And they'll look at it for maybe a minute at the most and just give me like a rating out of 10. That will be pretty accurate. And they probably need 10, 20 seconds, right? Maybe a couple of questions. What's this? How, like, okay, no, that's a 5 out of 10, throw it away. That's an 8 out of 10. Okay, that's a 10 out of 10. We can do the same. We can look at a blueprint, right, for a change initiative, and in literally under a minute, look at it and say, oh, this is amazing. This is going to hold together. This is going to work. Or this is like halfway there, but really it's going to fall apart in a year. Or just, you got to start again, right? And so you need this blueprint that kind of has all these different elements in it. And we can look at, now having done, we have 300 active partners at any time, having really studied all these, we can look at this and go, okay, that doesn't have enough coherence. There's a real coherence problem in there.
Yeah. One of the things, in working with organizations that I think they maybe undervalue when we first started talking about coherence is just how it's simple, and it's simplicity and elegance. So people will say like, yeah, everything needs to fit together, right? Like, yeah, that makes sense. It all needs to make sense together. But it's actually like really, truly how things build on each other. Like literally you can jolt energy into whatever change or transformation you're running by having it build on existing maps. And, the big question we get all the time is, can you measure that? And
I think we can. We started on this path about 5 years ago, and then the pandemic hit and we got distracted, and the business kind of exploded. But I want to come back to this for sure, because I think it can be measured. I actually think it needs a science to it, like just as real and solid as engineering, having a science for how much load you can put on a roof, right? It really needs some numbers. So it turns out, and I'll give you all some language. This has been really helpful to us. Please don't steal this without attributing us, but there's actually a scale of negative to positive. So if you draw a sort of sliding scale, right, you got 0 in the middle, you got maybe -10 on the left, +10 on the right. So a lot of what happens is someone will say, oh, we're going to do this big customer focused initiative, right? But we have these 3 other initiatives. We have lean going on, and we have a restructuring going on, a resizing. We have resizing, and we have lean, and we have a digital transformation going on. But we're going to add this customer focused strategy. So it's we're going to add this, but what we're going to do is we're going to sort of try to minimize the noise in relation to the other elements. So, we're going to sort of give it some language that sounds a bit like the other elements. Now, what's happened there is you're still in the negative side of coherence, because you've got like digital transformation, customer focus, downsizing, and these other things, and lean, right? Actually, all have some similar things, involved in them, right? They all have some similar kind of elements. And actually, what you'll find is that you're trying to make people do the exact same things across all 4. But what you're doing by labeling it is you're maybe taking it from a -10, where it's just overwhelming, to like a -7 now. And so a lot of the time when I hear clients saying, oh, we're really working on making everything fit together, what they're doing is they're making it slightly less bad. But it's actually still quite bad. And the positive side of this is that you kind of look at all those initiatives and you say, you know what, we're going to put lean aside. We're going to put, all these other things aside. We're going to do our resizing, because that completely distracts everyone, right? We're going to do the resizing soon. But while we're planning that, we're going to plan what's happening straight after. And we're going to immediately launch after resizing into one initiative, right? And this one initiative is going to have, 3 objectives only. And we're going to put all these other things aside. We're going to have, one focus. So now we're talking about positive coherence, right? Now you're actually like creating more simplicity, more clarity, and things holding together. So we've been thinking about numbers. we think there are about 5 different elements to coherence. So it's like how well things tie together automatically, how many tangles there are, which is essentially 2 things doing the same thing. So yeah, we'll come back to that. You'll probably see something from us in the next year. Maybe my team can put the coherence paper in here, because we have published on coherence a few years ago. But we do think there's a measure we should probably come back to. There's all sorts of interesting things in that paper, like there's vertical coherence and horizontal coherence. So vertical coherence is like, you know, this new change strategy, how does it tie with your purpose and your mission, right? And then the goals people are setting. So sort of up and down the organization conceptually, is it coherent? And then horizontally is how does it fit with other similar kinds of initiatives? So anyway, I think there's a lot more work to do, and as an institute, we'll invest in some of that work without any idea what we'll do with it, as usual. But we'll continue to to work on that. But I think so. Coherence is a really important idea, and if you have a complete learning strategy, or a leadership development strategy, or a culture change strategy, and you want us to actually kind of give you some feedback on it. We started doing that in the pandemic. So we can do, we call it a coherence analysis. So, if you're interested in talking to someone about that, we can come in and actually assess your change strategy, your leadership programs, your entire learning suite, whichever it is. We can actually assess it for coherence, as well as assess it for bias, as well as assess it for, threat reward, as well as assess it for growth mindset. If you're from a company, just put the word coherence in the chat and someone will reach out to you in the next, 7 days. And we'll have, we can have a further conversation about these kinds of assessments and kind of how we think about it. Thanks, Marcia. That was being fastest. Yeah, put the word coherence and maybe your company name. That'll help our people know who you are as well. Sorry, I should have said that first, Marcia and Maria. But yeah, coherence and your company name, we'll follow up. But anyway, it is an important thing. So as you're architecting, the first thing really is, before you build anything, structural integrity, right? That's what you've got to do. As you start. And I guess then the question becomes, what are the engineering principles? Like what are the engineering principles? Kind of what do we need to build to? What do you think about that, Rachel? I'm doing a lot of talking here. What do you think some of the engineering principles are? What do you think people need to build to for coherence?
So definitely coherence. And along the lines of coherence, so one of those factors of coherence that we're emphasizing fluency. So, and fluency is essentially the user experience, the ease of the user experience. How quickly can I understand what you're saying? How quickly, visually, reading. So it's about how people experience your change, written, visually, and otherwise. I think also there's this balance between PHS, what we know to be the large mechanisms for organizational change and the alignment there, down to what you mentioned, human motivation factors like capacity, motivation, and bias. I'm wondering what's coming up for you. I'm really interested in this idea, David, that you brought up around coherence, where there are these non-obvious things that people are getting wrong, or maybe that they're making assumptions around that aren't correct. And I think, as we point out the engineering principles, really talking about those things, what are people assuming is right but is really wrong? We should highlight that.
Yeah. So many things, lots of different directions there. So firstly, like, I think the fluency concept is really important. So fluency is like in a building, in a house. Fluency is like literally like how much you kind of pulled into the house and how natural it flows. It's really like the natural flow of things. Like you go naturally through a hallway and there's a kitchen, everything flows in the kitchen. You're not like things are on the wrong side of the kitchen, you're having to walk far, right? And the bedrooms and the bathrooms all kind of, so everything fits together just the right way. So it's similar to coherence, but it's sort of the user experience of coherence, is fluency. And in a house, it's literally like, how much do people love living in it, right? In a change journey, it's literally how much do people love, working with these ideas. I remember when we launched Clarity Energy Success at Microsoft some 7 or 8 years ago now. I introduced this to the top 600 people, and they were planning to give people tools about a month later to kind of go and start talking about it. There were 600 really senior people. And And Joe Whittinghill, the head of talent then at Microsoft, called me really soon after and said, yeah, we've got to do something faster because everyone's immediately using the ideas. They love them so much. I'm getting all these calls, literally the next week. I want to give a talk right now about create clarity, generate energy, deliver success as our leadership model. Like I want to talk about this immediately. It's so great. And so that's fluency. That's high fluency. People just love to be in that house. They love to be in those ideas, right? When they share these ideas, other people have insights, right? Other people go into a towards state. Other people go, oh, wow. So we've done some specific research on that as it relates to leadership principles, and the things are sticky, meaningful, and relevant, right? It needs to be very sticky. Meaningful is kind of coherence in another way, and really relevant to the person as you're kind of designing a leadership model. But that going back to fluency is just literally people are called into these ideas, and they love working with these ideas in that way. Another principle is, and this is you can really think of this in some ways in an engineering way, is as you mentioned, PHS. It's not PHF, it's PHS, priorities, habits, and systems. And this is sort of a way of getting humans moving. This is sort of looking at how you get humans moving, and this works at an individual level too. This is a very sort of scalable idea. Works at the individual level. It's how much is something a priority, right? If you want to be healthier, how do you make that a priority for the person? Then separately to that, how do you get people to really build habits around it? Now, this is where you sort of get into this question of, well, which habits, how many, how quickly, all this stuff. And those are really important questions. And often the answers are not obvious to that. You want people to be more customer focused. It's not obvious which are the right habits and in which order people really need. It takes some real work to research that. It takes us anywhere from like 6 months to like 4 years to answer those questions sometimes. So you got sort of, how do you get people to really care? How do you get people to really build habits? Now, this has to be the right habits. You have to embed them in individuals just right, with insight and positive pressure, right? But then you also have to scale them just right, kind of across that system. So that's the habits. And then the systems level is like, how do you keep people focused on those habits and those priorities? So it's just kind of a way of looking at sort of the more marketing and communication component, which is, but looking at it as getting people to really prioritize this. Then the real change component is the habits piece, getting people to really build those habits. And then the systems piece is supporting it. And to be honest, if you flash a change blueprint in front of me, that's the first thing I'm going to look for. The first thing I'm going to look for is, show me the first thing people see to make this a priority. And I'm going to look at it. It's either going to be sticky, meaningful, and relevant, or it's not. And mostly it's not. I'm going to be like, oh, that's overwhelming. People are immediately turned off. Oh, that's super clear. That's super compelling, right? People are immediately excited, right? So what's the immediate response people have to your priority? I'll be looking at that. Then I'll be looking really closely at a very important question. How are you actually going to build habits? Now, we're starting to see some companies doing this on their own better. I think we've been out talking about this a while now, but most of the time, like 90 to 95% of the time, I look at a company's habit activation strategy, and it's not a habit activation strategy, right? It's a communication strategy. It's not a habit activation strategy. And there's a real science to habit activation. In fact, you're going to see a webinar. If you're interested in this topic, you should watch the session coming up in a few weeks. We're launching the whole concept of a habit activation platform. It's something we've been working on probably for 26 years, but really deeply the last 2 years. A habit activation platform is not an LMS, and it's not an LXP. So it's not a learning management system. It's not a learning experience system, which is an evolution of that. It's a habit activation platform, which really focuses on the central question of, are we really getting people to build habits here? So it focuses on insight. It focuses on social pressure. It focuses on doing all that over time. It's a really different idea. So the central thing I'd look at, if you put a blueprint in front of me, the central thing I would look at is show me your habit activation strategy. And I can tell in under a minute, usually under a very quick time, that's not a habit activation strategy. Or it might be, right? And then we might want to tweak it a bit with you. Like, that's pretty good. Let's try this. Let's put it in this order. Let's chop it down to 3 things. Let's spread it out this way. And now it's a reasonable habit activation strategy. What's fascinating is it's technology independent. It's kind of independent. Like you can build a habit activation strategy based on just flashcards and, send it out to retail, 1,000 retail stores. You can build one based on high-tech content. You can build one on low-tech, on medium tech. It's not about the technology really, although the technology can help, but it's really about, are you creating insights socially over time? That's kind of the habit piece. So priorities, habit systems, that's sort of the central thing I would look at when looking at someone's change journey. But we'd also look at coherence, which is separate, right? And then fluency. The fluency is kind of inside of priorities. And then we'd also look at a big one you mentioned, and we can get to this, I guess, if you're interested, but the big one we mentioned is, are we aligning with human capacity issues, like giving people the right amount and the way they can digest? Are we working within the human biases the right way? And are we motivating people the right way? So kind of capacity, motivation, and bias are some of the deeper principles that we've got to kind of align to. But I've been doing a lot of talking. I'm sure there's some questions. Anyone have any questions? We've still got a good 15 minutes left. Anyone have any questions on what we've been talking about so far? Throw those in the chat. I think there's a Q&A as well. I guess we'll see them in the Q&A. You can put them in the Q&A or in the chat, whatever you like.
As we're waiting for those questions to come in, I see a couple coming through, but just want to echo, anytime I'm working with an organization, it's that habit activation piece that's missing more often than not. And it was, I mean, so many times we talked about this earlier this hour, but even if you have this great change and there's no way for you to express it, to do something, you're lacking that feeling of self-efficacy. You really have to design for action. And that was a huge part of one of the newest products that we have, Lead. I wonder if you want to mention that for a second, David, because I mean, thinking about how leaders take action, the habits that they need to create change and transformation at scale were critical in thinking about the key habits and the IP we put in.
Yeah. I'll apologize in advance to people who've been following us for a while, because we've been talking about Lead a lot. It's because we're incredibly excited about it. Well, it's the most significant change for us in 26 years. We've been through a few changes. And the last big one was 7 or 8 years ago, where we realized we should modularize everything into these 30-day experiences. And now we're up to a few million people learning our work each year. But we think we can add a 0, even 2 to that with what we're doing now. So essentially what we sort of always avoided, like building a sort of platform or something like that, because we didn't think the technology was there to actually really create insight and make it social and sort of hold people over time. What we've seen is the technology's caught up, especially with the advent of AI and some of the things that can do. So we had a whole lot of organizations say to us, we've got a coherence problem, which is ironic because we've been essentially building and sharing these 30-day modules across a whole organization for about 7 years now. So if you're Akamai, for example, you've got 10,000 people. Folks are learning about growth mindset first. And then they might learn about inclusion, then they might learn about speaking up. And each of these are these 30-day experiences. And we call these whole of company habit activation strategies. So no one else is really doing that. And that's been sort of the core of our business. So an organization will call us and say, we want to be more customer focused. And we'll say, all right, great. Let's put in growth mindset first across the whole company for a month. A couple of months later, let's put in improve around asking for feedback. A couple of months later, let's put in team around psych safety, and it'll really impact the organization. But we were having this coherence problem, which is that companies were saying, well, this is great, but we're still doing this leadership program through such and such a provider, and we're starting to get a bit of muddle, right? And we're like, well, we've built custom leadership programs for some amazing companies that have gone to thousands of people, incredibly successful. Could we build kind of a standard set of essential habits that all people managers at all levels in a company should have? It's a really interesting challenge. Are there a set of common habits that whether you're a frontline manager or the CEO that everyone should actually have, but just in slightly different ways? And we found there was. And so we spent the last 1.5 years or so building this solution that takes people over time through the foundational things you would want to be a better manager or leader. And the reason we did this is kind of a place that all managers should start, and then you can come and add on, okay, let's do a 30-day sprint on growth mindset. Let's do it. And everything now fits together. So we were trying to solve our own coherence problem, particularly with some of our larger partners, so that everything you're learning as a manager now ties in with what you're learning about, say, allyship or psych safety or these other things. So we're trying to create this massive coherence. And what we've ended up doing, aside from arguing massively for a year and a half, what we've ended up doing is building a 6-month experience. It's only 15 minutes a week. Of you slowly learning the 9 most important habits for leading at any level. Now, this creates common language across all levels of the business, right? Creates really powerful like knowledge sharing, because it's done in cohorts. So you're getting the knowledge sharing and the retention benefits of like offsites, but you're doing it digitally, right? You're getting the overtime and real insight benefits of coaching, but you're doing it with creating groups, and you're not losing people because external coaching can increase losing people, but you're getting the scale and cost of e-learning, but you're actually getting people to do it. So we've sort of solved for the downsides of offsites and coaching and normal e-learning, and created this platform over time. And then I think what's going to really make it work is we've created this tool called Niles, and Niles is a neuro-intelligent leadership enhancer. So Niles is a character that you ask any question. Hey, I've got this, I'm having conflict with this team member. What do I do? And Niles will actually tell you, based on all our research, what the most effective thing is you can do. You can ask another question. Hey, can you give me that? And like, can you tell me the one thing I should focus on? Or can you give me that in 100 words? Or can you give me like an example and take me through it? And Niles will do all that. So we've powered up this AI with everything we've published and all this incredible insight. Niles can actually coach you through things or just answer things. And so what we're seeing coming very, very soon is, people go through this 6-month experience, but also at any time they can just pick up their phone and say, hey, Niles, I'm about to go into onboard a new team member. What do I do? And up comes a really simple set of like, you might be tempted to do this, try this instead. So this is kind of immediacy. So that's where we're going, and all of it based on the research that we've done. So that's how we're solving for coherence. You can see we're excited. It's the craziest thing. We actually also, for the first time in 26 years, have opened our core programs to the public. So you can actually do this program if you're not in a company. That's not the case with all of our other solutions, but you can now do this 6-month experience in a cohort. I know the first cohort sold out really quickly. We've just opened the second cohort. My team can probably put that in the chat. Anyway, that's kind of how we're solving for coherence, and it's this will be a 5 to 10 year journey for us, I'm sure. But the vision is, you open your calendar in the morning and you see a little pop up. Hey, you've got this meeting coming up with this person according to their Scarf profile and yours, which we've read automatically. This is what you'll probably accidentally do, but why don't you try this instead? So really neuro-intelligent nudges, as well as this neuro-intelligent coach, all based on the insights that you've learned around Scarf and Seeds and these other things. So that's where we're going. It's kind of fun, keeping me very very engaged.
So what I hear is we're creating tons and tons of architect skills in all these leaders that will be going through, that will be able to better manage themselves and their focus and coherence slowly. We are getting good questions.
We should take some questions. Just before we do, one quick thing before we do take some questions. I see some great ones coming in. Just if you're from an organization and you want to know about Lead, you want someone to like show you a demo, show you Niles, show you through the platform, just put just put the word Lead, L-E-A-D, and your company name, and someone will follow up with you fairly quickly. Just put Lead and your company name if you're from a company and you want to know more about Lead. We're also doing a product demo if you just want to sort of drop into something. We're doing a like 25-minute demo every week or so. That should be on the website. And Avon Lead is being launched in about just a bit more than a week. It'll be inside the platform. We're doing final testing, so you'll get to play with it. Look forward to your feedback. All right, questions. What do we got?
All right, so we have one from Ted. Hi, Ted, asking about readiness, how we think about readiness. Do you need readiness? Is it a precondition for habit formation? How do you help people get ready?
Yeah, that's interesting. So there's these two sort of directions you can go with habit activation. You can sort of go into trying to assess, or you can go into trying to develop, right? And it's sort of like this whole thing of like do you study the problem, or do you study the solution, right? Like, do you dig into the source of problems, or do you do appreciative inquiry and try to understand where people are trying to go, right? It's sort of philosophically, we're on the kind of strange attractor side of things. Like, let's put in a strange attractor and pull people towards it, more so than assess if they're ready. So what makes people ready, what those strange attractors are, to draw from physics, what those strange attractors are is like the CEO saying this is important, right? The CEO saying, if I run into you anywhere in the building, I'm going to ask you about this, right? That's a strange attractor. The CHRO is saying, hey, this is the most important thing that we're doing for the next 30 days, right? I need you to focus on this, and I'm going to check in with you about it. Your manager saying, hey, I know we've got a lot on, but we're going to focus on this for 10 minutes every week for the next month. That's literally what a change initiative might be. 5 or 10 minutes a week for a month. We're going to actually focus on it. I'm going to ask you these questions. Hey, it might be annoying, but we're going to do it. So the strange attractors to me are the supports and the structures that you put in that creates readiness, more so than sort of assessing readiness. And it's just sort of, the more you get all those things in place, the more you get like 90 to 95% of a large audience engaging in your initiative. We've had 96% of 100,000 people engage fully in an initiative in one example. So you can really get a lot of people engaging. And to be honest, what happens is other people engaging is what makes everyone engage. Back to that kind of, one principle.
Yeah. I think I see most organizations spending a lot of time gauging readiness instead of creating it, like you're talking about, where it's,
Measuring it.
Yeah, measure it. Take the first 12 months of your transformation, create a before and an after time, or that sandwich those first 12 months, and give everybody the learning they need. Create the attractors, the senior leadership engagement. That we have another question in here. How do you work with corporations that already have established HR policies, culture contributions, priority skills for people management?
Yeah, thanks, Natalia. Good question. The answer is we wake up and start, because that's every company. That's every company. And, sometimes we'll start with this coherence analysis, right, where we'll actually assess like your whole talent pathway, from talent acquisition to performance management to learning and development to workforce planning, right? So the four sort of big, we think of those as the four big chunks, right? Talent acquisition, performance management, learning and development, workforce planning. We'll look at them, and we'll look at them from the perspective of all your policies and processes. How much coherence is there? How much bias is there? Is it growth mindset or fixed mindset, being nudged? Are they creating threats or rewards? So we can look at all of it, across all of it. That's a big project. Usually it's a bit more narrow. Like, a company will say, hey, can you tell us how much bias there is in our recruiting practice, accidentally? Show us where there's accidental bias in our whole recruiting process. So we might sort of take one element and sort of one chunk, but you can do all of it. But so sometimes we'll start like that. We'll kind of assess all that. We do a lot of research briefings for HR teams and executive teams on a particular topic. Like right now, a lot of companies are saying we need to really rethink performance management. Yeah. And so, our performance management is not encouraging quality conversations. Can you come in and talk to us about, in our HR team, about performance management? So we'll come in and talk about, what it looks like to architect, that's an important word, to architect a performance management strategy with quality conversations as the thing you're solving for. Like, if you're trying to solve for quality conversations, this is how you'd architect it. And it looks really different. What most performance management systems solve for is the perception of paying people fairly. They're trying to solve for people feeling like they're paid fairly. What ends up happening as an unintended consequence is actually really poor quality conversations and no one feeling like they're being paid fairly. It's really weird. But we do a whole briefing on that, and then we end up kind of designing these strategies. I saw someone from Cigna in the chat. We designed Cigna's whole performance management strategy. It actually won an award, and is like a really different way of doing it some years back. But that's a piece. If you're interested in that work, just put and you're from a company, put performance management. We'll get someone to reach out, chat with you about kind of a briefing or, thinking about that. Just put your company name and performance management in the chat. But that's a lot of folks have, everyone has existing policies. So sometimes we'll come in and kind of, show you, look, this is the area to start, or let's assess all of it. Or often we'll start, probably the most powerful and common place that we'll start with an organization is one of two things: either growth mindset. So we'll put in place like a growth mindset initiative across the company because it kind of creates fertile minds everywhere. We do that a lot. Or we'll come in and reinvent the whole approach to leadership. And as a result, reinvent like the little bit of the mission and the purpose and the culture work. So we'll create a new architecture for how people should, interact. So that's often how we start. We call that kind of leadership principles.
Yeah. And I know we're getting close to the top of the hour. I'm wondering, David, if you have a final piece of advice. So we talked about coherence, structural integrity. As you think about that architecture and the big bad wolf blowing on everybody's, transformation house, what's your piece of advice?
Yeah, I mean, look, one thing, sorry, this is a bit self-serving, but we have a 6-month program for folks who are passionate about really learning this work. It's called the Certificate in the Foundations of Neuroleadership. It's a mouthful, but it's literally a certificate in neuroleadership. And it's a 6-month journey as an individual contributor for your own learning, to really understand the science. So if you're a change agent, get yourself into one of those. We run it, I think, twice a year. My team can put that in the chat, but you'll find it in our education programs at neuroleadership.com. But the Certificate in the Foundation of Neuroleadership, like, it's a long way of saying do something that really gets you educated about the deeper science here. If you're from a company, get your company to be a corporate member. We've done lots and lots of webinars on coherence. We've published lots of papers. As a corporate member, you can get access to tons of content to self-educate on coherence. A lot of our partners do that. So corporate membership is a really good idea. It's actually not very expensive. The whole talent team gets access to all our research over, all this time. So corporate membership is really worth exploring. I guess I'm going to do it again. If you're interested in corporate membership, just put your company name and corporate membership in the chat. Someone will follow up with you. But that's a good way to kind of get access to tons and tons of research to really understand coherence, and lots of case studies. So I think the other thing is we're really happy to do a no-cost briefing to your company. If you're a mid to large organization and you want to understand this, bring us in to just brief your whole HR team on the science of coherence, and some of the things that we've talked about today. But in wrapping up, and we'll hand back to Shelby. In wrapping up, I think that company change should be studied like engineering is studied. I think the organizational change should have the same kind of level of rigor and data that architecture has. We should have real metrics for coherence in all the different ways, real metrics for fluency, real metrics for PHS, real metrics for the quality of habit activation strategy. I think we're going to continue to work on that stuff over the next few years. But that's really important to me. But Rachel, thanks for the great conversation. Super important one for us to keep digging into. Thanks everyone for being here. Your great questions. And feel free to reach out if we can help with anything. So thanks so much, Rachel. We'll hand back to Shelby. 30 seconds of announcements. Stay on for 30 seconds of announcements. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you again, Rachel and David, for a wonderful conversation. Just to wrap things up quickly, we are going to share a poll, so let us know how NLI can help you in the future. As David mentioned, our second lead cohort is going to be launching April 18th. So if you're interested in joining the next group, our team will share that information again. We've had wonderful progress so far in the first cohort, and we're looking forward to seeing how it continues to evolve. Insider Exchange. This is specifically for senior executives. If you enjoy your Brain at Work Live, we think you'll love the Insider program. It's an exclusive opportunity where you can enjoy benefits such as first look at new research, roundtable discussions with leading executives, and helping us craft new innovations. So if you're interested in that, we will share a link as well. Also, we're looking to expand. If you want to host an NLI event, we really want to continue to partner with our community. So If your organization is interested in hosting an event with NLI in the future, please check out that link in the chat. And we look forward to the opportunity to continue to build positive relationships with organizations globally. Lastly, the podcast, as always, if you enjoyed today's conversation, you can hear this one and others on our podcast, Your Brain at Work, wherever you listen to. And this is where we say farewell. So on behalf of our team behind the scenes, thank you so much for being here. Happy International Women's Day and have a wonderful weekend. We'll see you next week.